Hi, and welcome to another episode of Silver Goose Farm Stories. I'm your host, Mama Goose, aka Maria Silva. So I just want to start this podcast off with a little bit of a disclaimer. We're talking about some harrowing cow emergency surgical practices that I might have been alluding to in the past podcast episodes and blog entries. So if you're a little bit squeamish about hearing about those things, please click out. There are other podcasts that we have on our website that are less bloody, less harrowing. Hope you enjoy those. Also, this one's a kind of a longer episode, so feel free to grab yourself a beverage and a snack and sit back and listen to all of the adventures or misadventures that my husband and I have been going through on our farm. About a month ago, my husband stabbed our cow, and I'm the one that told him to do it. I suppose that's a pretty dramatic way to begin this podcast, so let's back up and begin at the beginning, and hopefully you'll have a better understanding of what in the world happened. About a month ago, on an uncomfortably warm summer night, my husband was out doing the animal chores, and I was putting our youngest two kids to bed. He was staying out later than usual because there was some weird noises coming from the properties next to us, and there's been a lot of packs of coyote sightings and even possibly rumors of a wolf for the first time in the area in a long time, and so he really wanted to make sure that everyone was okay, especially because our calves are a little bit rambunctious and like to get into trouble, and we definitely didn't want them being separated from their mamas. So I get a text from my husband saying that he thinks something's wrong with Lavelle. She isn't really getting up, and the first thought that comes to my mind is, oh no, not again, because if you've been with us for a while, we've had a similar down cow situation with Cookie, and that did not end well. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and read you the text messages that he's been sending to give you an idea of what our conversation was like. Not sure what the earlier sound was, but Dexter is in. He's at one of our bulls. Lavelle might have an issue. She's away from the rest of the bottom of the pasture, and I can't get her up. Going to haul her some water because she seems thirsty and scared. Do you need me? I'm okay for now. Okay. Anything you can think of to check for? I don't see anything visibly wrong. My two guesses are that I didn't milk today or that mating was too rough and she's injured somewhere. Udder seems okay though, and I don't see anything wrong with her. She drank some, but not a ton. Milk fever maybe? Is she walking okay? Udder hot or hard? If it was milk fever, she wouldn't eat or have trouble walking. If her calf is nursing, then it shouldn't have bothered her. Maybe she needs mineral salts. There's a bag of it in the driveway, I think. She won't stand up or even make an attempt, and usually she does not let me near her at night. I can't imagine how rough a bull mating would be because she made it to a Guernsey before. Oh, like Cookie? I felt her legs as she reacted, and she doesn't show pain when I squeeze them. Cookie tried to get up, but yes. No blood? Not that I can see. I can't see the half she's lying on. Udder feels normal temperature, full but not over full. I wonder if she's bloated. Maybe she got grain this morning and got back in. Does she look bloated or feel tight? Stomach feels tight, but she's lying down, can't really tell. Yes. Is she belching, or can you hear her stomach kind of rumbling like the digestion sounds? She just stood up with great difficulty. That's encouraging. She seemed to try to burp, but nothing happened. She just made a weird face. She may be bloated. Looks pretty big. Left side big? Huge. That sounds like bloat. Any froth? She's standing up, but standing still and wobbly. No, okay, I'll head back. Is she walking? No. Can you try and make her walk? It'll help her burp. And then my husband proceeds to send me a picture of Lavelle from the back. She does look very big. Any trouble breathing? She seems okay breathing, just very uncomfortable. I gotta look it up in my book. She took a tiny baby step, really just shuffling her feet, but at least it's something. Looks like she might be straining her middle to poop or burp, but no success yet. Okay. She's gradually drinking more. Good. Book says keep her moving. The other cows came to push her around, so she walked a few steps. If no froth, apparently it's not mortally dangerous. Hoping the little guy will nurse. But she's got to pass gas somehow. I'm going to see if I have bloat meds. I'll stay for a while to see what happens. 14% battery. Daisy came and knocked over her water, which is very in character for her. Fun. I have bloat meds. I'm coming. Fence is off. We're down near the creek. So I get out of bed. Throw a bathrobe over my PJs. Throw on the baby carrier and strap a newborn to my chest. Tug on my boots and trek out in the middle of the night to the cow pasture with my headlamp on, my trusty Keeping a Family cow book in one hand, and bloat meds in the other. I find my husband and Lavelle at the very back end of the pasture down by the creek. Lavelle gets up when she sees me because we're still not friends. She slowly walks away, and she is big, but she moves and makes a little burp. She takes a step and then stops. My husband pushes on her, and she takes a tiny step backwards. He pushes on her, and that barreled body of hers makes this really odd sloshing sound. Alpha, one of our dogs, peeks out from behind my husband's legs, and Lavelle charges at him, my husband dodging her head at the last minute. Lavelle is not friends with Alpha either. In her haste to charge at the dog, she loses her footing and a hoof slips, but she is able to get back up pretty quickly, albeit with a little less grace than she normally does. I'm trying to flip through my cow book to figure out what is going on and how we treat it, but there are so many weird, creeping, flying bug things swarming around my head because of that stupid, insert profane word here, headlamp on my face, and they're covering up the text on the page and flying in my eye and trying to crawl up my nose and getting into my mouth when I try to tell Hank something, and some of them have crawled down my shirt and are biting me super hard. And if you've listened to our podcast episode about bugs, you will know the sheer force of will I had to bear in order not to have an absolute psychotic meltdown. It was just truly an awful experience for me. I only managed a kind of whiny, I can't think the bugs and the light, I have to stop. And then I unceremoniously switched off the headlamp and clomped over to my husband and rubbed my face on his shirt sleeve because it was just the only thing I could think of doing. My husband pushed on Lavelle again, but this time she didn't step forward. I pushed on her, I don't know why, it was stupid because if my husband, who's got almost 100 pounds on me, can't move her, how in the world was I going to do it? But I did, and it didn't work. Lavelle, though smaller than Cookie was, is still a big animal, and she's stocky and strong because she's part milking Devon, which is essentially an ox. So if she doesn't want to move, she's not going to move. My husband pushed from a different angle, and when he made impact with her, we could hear that sloshing sound again, like a big barrel of water. He tried again, and this time she took a step, and then let out this jet stream of urine. Thank you very much, Lavelle, that we just barely dodged. But that was a good sign, because it means she had been hydrated. We were a little bit worried that maybe she had been down all day, and then would be severely dehydrated. But no, she still had some liquid in her. So my husband pushes again. She takes a step forward, and then lets loose just a stream of liquid poop that my husband just jumps out of the way of in the nick of time. He pushes again, and he says, I got it on my hands. And then she flicks her tail at him, and of course the end of her tail is just dipped in whatever has come out of her backside, and it just splatters all over his shirt. So gross. My husband has liquid poop splattered all the way up his arms and across his chest. I ask him a question and he only grunts, continuing to push this cow up the hill. She's taking these lumbering steps unwillingly, and then I realize he's not answering me because he's trying to keep his mouth shut. We get her walking halfway up to the pen, and then Brownie, her calf, sort of scampers down. He looks in good spirits and he looks very happy to see his mom. And we're sort of musing on how we are supposed to keep her going when she goes to join the other cows that are resting on the pasture. We do notice that the calf is nursing on her, which is good because then she's not going to get mastitis, hopefully. So at this point, it is well past midnight. My husband's covered in poop, and we have to get up in the morning in 3 hours because it was my daughter's name day that day. But we went to bed thinking that perhaps we'd gotten past the worst of it because she was walking now without being forced to. She was letting her calf nurse, and she seemed to be interested in joining the rest of the herd. We all got up at 4 that following morning to go to the monastery, but before we leave, my husband runs to check on the cows. Lavelle looks big, but not bigger than that night. Plus, she's on her feet when he goes out to check on her, so we go to church. Just as a sidebar, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the hours of services at certain Orthodox monasteries, this is just normal. Liturgy is just around midnight or at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in this instance. We get back from liturgy by 6:30. My husband and I change in farm clothes, and it couldn't have taken more than 15 minutes to do so. And we trek out to the pasture to see the cows. I'm a little bit slower than he is because I have some little kids that want to tag along with me, and of course the baby that's strapped on to my chest. But when I get close to the cow pasture, I see my husband, who's pretty far ahead of me, start running. Oh no, I think. And I start moving as fast as I can with a baby attached to me and children holding onto my hands to catch up with him. As I come up to the crest of the hill of the cow pasture, I see Lavelle. She's round like a beach ball, on the ground, on her side, legs sticking straight out, neck stretched all the way out and completely unmoving. She's dead, I thought. And just my heart sank, and I thought, not again. But when she heard the sound of my husband running towards her, she lifted her head with great effort, and that was probably the most amazing feeling of relief that I have felt in a long time. "Do you have a knife?" I yell. He pulls out a utility knife from his pocket. "Here?" he asks, and I'm so glad he knows exactly what I'm going to ask him to do. He points to a spot on her side. "I think so," I say. Nothing looks the same because her abdomen is so distended and so unrecognizable in this state. Think Violet Beauregard from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory after she chews on that blueberry gum. Just completely round. There are no recognizable body forms on her. So he raises his arm and brings it down with such a force on what we are hoping is the spot of her rumen that I flinch hard, but his hand just bounces off her side. He does it again, but just barely gets through the hide because the blade of his utility knife is too short and it can't get through the rumen. "I'll be right back," he says, and he runs up the hill, and I'm just hoping that he comes back before she suffocates to death. I am next to Lavelle, trying to talk to her and keep her calm and dialing and redialing our vet's office, but they don't open for another half hour and no one's answering. My husband comes back with an assortment of kitchen knives, and we take a step back and look at her side to regroup and figure out where we think is the best place to do this emergency operation. The high point of her left side, we think, because, that should be where all the gases are. And so my husband brings down this knife. I think it was a steak knife or something from our kitchen. He brings it down again, and this time he makes it through. But nothing happens. "Now what?" he says. "You have to twist the blade to make it an opening." He twists with a wince, and as he does, foamy, bubbly gas starts spurting out, but it's not in that rush of air that we've seen in YouTube videos. And then the gas stops and nothing else comes out. She's still enormous and she's still struggling to breathe, and there's nothing else coming out. I feel panic crawling up my throat now. She cannot die. Not another cow. I wouldn't know what to do. Like, what would people think? I'm just cow murderers. And also, like, another milk cow, how? And so I'm looking where the puncture is. It's in the rumen, but why isn't the gas being released? My husband suggests a straw or some sort of tube to try and keep the hole open, and maybe that'll help encourage more gas to escape. So I run back into the kitchen and I get the straw for like my big water tumbler, and he puts it into the hole and it's in there and it starts to help a little bit, but the gas is coming out in these little ineffective spurts. My husband leans down with his whole body weight, and this time this bubbly gas with this brown, green, foamy liquid comes up. And then there's no gas again, just liquid. Why is there so much liquid? There shouldn't be this much in a rumen. I finally get through to the vet's office, and they have me take some pictures and email them to the vet. And the vet calls me and walks me through checking like how she is, some vitals. She's telling me that we don't want to try another puncture wound because that just, every time we create an opening, is just another invitation for infection. We must have relieved enough pressure from Lavelle because she's rolled up onto her legs. She's still down on the ground, but she's no longer lying flat on her side. She still can't get up. And at first I was feeling optimistic because, she's moving again, but we discovered that because she's repositioned herself, we can see that the puncture in the hide and the puncture in her rumen are no longer lining up, and therefore now nothing is coming out, and that is not ideal. You have to get her back on her side again. Make that puncture site the high point, says the vet. So my husband pushes his shoulder down onto her cow's side and tips Lavelle back onto the ground. And as she does, there's this great expulsion of air, and she deflates in front of our eyes and immediately stands up and walks a bit away from us. We take this time to assess the rest of the herd. All of the other cows also look miserable. Liquid poop, lethargic, barely moving. What is going on? I had this sinking feeling that we were going to lose all of them. You have to check to see if she has any blockages ahead of her rumen causing the bloat, our vet says. She instructs us to give her the bloat treatment because she's still pretty big. And if she can swallow it all and hold it down, we'll know there's no blockages. For the other cows, everyone was moving and drinking and shooting foul-looking liquid from their backsides, but no one was bloated the same way that Lavelle was, so they weren't going to die on us right then, and were secondary concerns. The vet advised us to keep an eye on everyone, keep them hydrated, make sure they stay moving, and perhaps give electrolytes and probiotics to Lavelle to kind of restore the condition of her rumen. We also drenched her wound with iodine solution. Our vet said to make it look like a really strong iced tea, and pasted an extra eye patch we had over the puncture wound to keep the flies off, and then sprayed her down with that commercial strength fly spray, just as an added insurance. But we had no idea what was causing it. The vet thought that maybe it was the hay, because it's usually the feed. At this point in the summer, there is no grass, and we rely completely on hay to feed our grazing animals. And, there was also random bouts of rain this summer that is completely unusual to this area, and maybe that had introduced some sort of mold spores in what they were eating. Maybe there was a noxious weed, because everyone who is baling hay is doing so at high demand because of the past droughts and wildfires, and maybe something wasn't done, or in an area that wasn't wasn't well treated or for pesticides, or maybe there was just some crazy growth, or I don't know. We were just like throwing random theories of what it could possibly be. The vet couldn't come out to our farm for about a week and a half. She's one of only a very few large animal vets in the area, and the big farms and dairies, of which there are a lot here, usually get first priority. Meanwhile, my dad came and did a prayer and a blessing for the herd. And the next few days and nights, my husband and I would tag team to go out every few hours to check on the herd. Me mainly during the day and him at night. We'd make them get up and walk, make sure their water was clean and that the level of water was changing so that they were hydrated. Because if not, we were going to have to manually make them drink 8 to 10 gallons of water a day. That seemed like a very daunting prospect. We were also going out to keep an eye on their rumen and make an assessment of their stool and see if they were feeding from their salt or mineral buckets. The first night after the emergency rumen puncture, we went out, had to give Lavelle another bloat treatment around midnight because she was looking big and lethargic again. But that treatment seemed to be very effective, and we could actually see a change in her behavior within a few minutes. So now I have a stockpile of the bloat treatment in our animal supplies in case any other of our grazing animals decides to scare us. So thinking back of what could have caused the problem, we said that the vet thought it might have been the oat hay we were giving our cows, because when we got this new batch of hay from the same place that we had been getting hay for months and months and months, our cows picked through it rather than eating with gusto. One of our bulls did get out at one point before this happened, and he enjoyed some of the grain or some of the chicken grain that was out, but not a ton. And that doesn't explain why all of the other cows also were sick. We stopped to giving them that batch of hay just to be sure, and that was a little painful for our wallet, and got some new bales and gave them that instead. After a few days, all of the cows were eating somewhat regularly, not nearly with the same enthusiasm as they usually did, but we were just glad to see that they were eating anything. But they were drinking and eating, and my husband and I haven't talked so much and in so much detail about cow poops before, ever. So the vet finally was able to come out to our farm, and she did a pretty thorough check over Lavelle. Lavelle didn't have a fever. She was eating and drinking well at this point. She was having normal stool, and she was burping regularly with healthy rumen movement. The vet and her assistant were examining the puncture wound, and we discovered that it hadn't closed from the inside. It was sort of closed, scabbed over on the outside, but the rumen wound was still open, and that's not good. So she gave us a couple options, because the big risk right now and what she really wants to prevent from happening is peritonitis, which is infection of that abdominal lining between the hide and the rumen itself. The normal clinical response to this was that she could surgically open the wound larger and cut away the dead tissue, because the gases being expelled from the rumen through this opening was likely making some of the tissue surrounding the wound necrotic. And then she would adhere the rumen lining to the skin, sew it all together, so that there's only one single opening instead of two, separated ones, to allow the healing process that way. Trouble is, it's obviously an invasive procedure, and there's no telling how much necrotic tissue there would be. Like, we have no idea how much she would have to cut out, how far she would have to go, and it could potentially make this current situation worse and longer to heal, obviously, and also, super expensive. Her other option that she gave to us was that because Lavelle was acting normally and checked out physically overall, she recommended that we just irrigate the wound with some iodine solution, that same consistency as we used before, just as often as possible, to clean out any leaking rumen contents and hopefully clear out the wound to allow it to close without an infection. Vaseline rubbed on the underside of the wound to prevent irritation from any rumen contents or iodine solution that's like constantly dripping from her, and of course fly spray for as long as it takes for that inside puncture to close up. She gave us antibiotics and a second dose to give later, and then took a stool sample and wished us luck. She said she was pretty optimistic because Lavelle hadn't shown any signs of infection yet, and normally that would have been evident within a few days of the puncture happening. And she said that once we get past the 2-week mark, the likelihood of any like serious complications coming up would be very slim. And so my husband and I diligently irrigated Lavelle for days. The vet left us with like a tube, a syringe-like tube that we could insert into the just under the underside of the wound and squeeze out the iodine, and it would push out anything that had built up, any sort of like bodily fluids, rumen fluids, and that sort of thing. And we did that for days and days and days. And now, about a month in, the wound has closed, and fingers crossed, Lavelle looks great and hopefully stays that way. One of the things that our vet mentioned was that she thought that it was just, this was possibly a case of ruminal acidosis because of the fact that there was so much liquid inside of Lavelle's rumen. So when my husband punctured the rumen, the gas that expelled out should have been enough to decrease the bloat and make Lavelle feel better and get up. But that didn't happen because there was so much liquid inside of her body. Her reticulum was absorbing liquid. Normally, a rumen is about 1/3 liquid, a bit of food stuffs in between, and then the rest of it is empty space and for gas to kind of move in and out. But when it's ruminal acidosis, the reticulum is just drawing water from everywhere in the body, trying to fix what's going on inside of her. And when we were trying to pump gases out and instead got liquid out, we were expelling whatever inside of her rumen was making her sick, hopefully, but that would explain the high water content. I talk a bit about bloat and ruminal acidosis and some treatments and steps that you can do in order to treat that on our blog. If you're interested in reading about it, I'll put a link in the description to this podcast. We have since ordered a trocar and cannula. It's a type of surgical tool that is more suited for puncturing your cow side, and a drenching tube. And I have so many new skills and experiences on our homesteading belt. I hope I never have to use them again in a similar situation, but they're there either way. I know that my husband felt a lot of guilt about not putting the puncture in the most ideal way or spot, but we were completely unprepared and did the best that we could. And, I keep telling my husband, it was either that, you either puncture your cow, try and save them from bloat, risk the infection, or she dies. And I solidly believe that Lavelle wouldn't have made it if my husband hadn't done what he did. I don't wish this experience on anyone, but hopefully if you have cows or ruminants and you do come across this, that you'll be able to have as successful or more successful outcome than we did here on our farm. Lavelle and all of our herd are back to their normal selves, squabbling amongst each other and hollering at us for food. And I honestly couldn't ask for more than that. Let me know your thoughts and experiences with ruminants and bloat. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them on our website at silvergoosefamilyfarm.com. You can also see what's going on a regular basis through our Instagram, same handle, Silver Goose Family Farm. And we'll be back with more stories soon. Hopefully not any that are as dramatic as this right away, just because my poor heart can't take it. But until then, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.